Clean Pastures is a 1937 Merrie Melodies cartoon from Warner Brothers, directed by Freleng, and this is actually one of Warner Brothers' Censored 11. The Censored 11 are 11 cartoons that were removed from syndication, mostly because they are racist. They are deemed as racist. Obviously, at the time, they weren't released as racist cartoons. Some of the reception of some of the cartoons basically all said, yes, that's racist. Some of them were actually made in part by black people who supported the cartoon as a celebration of various aspects of jazz music and black culture. When it comes to Clean Pastures, there's little in this that can be celebrated in terms of black culture and actually seeing it as a positive thing. This focuses on this kind of nightclub and bars. This area known as Paradise, as in pair of dice, paradise. It's meant to represent this heaven. And it took me a while to get that pun, I'll be perfectly honest. And we basically see a lot of black individuals gambling, drinking, debauching, possibly doing all kinds of, things that are generally frowned upon by a lot of people. And yes, we have some good music accompanying this action. And it is a musical film, so some of it's actually being sung. And I will say the musical element of it I liked. Well, like is a strong word because I'm not a fan of jazz music in general, but I thought it was pretty decent. It worked well. It didn't sound too jarring. It wasn't too bad at all. And that seems to be a case with a lot of the Censored 11. The music seems to be pretty good. It's what's being depicted in animation that is a little bit of a problem. And when I was watching this one, when I sit down to watch these Censored 11s, I kind of brace myself and think, how bad is this going to be? And honestly, the action is not horrifically bad. If the action had been carried out by a mix of blacks, whites, other cultures, other representations, it would just be a scene about people maybe letting their hair down, behaving perhaps not completely morally, but it would be an observation rather than a criticism. But because all of the characters are black, it does make you stop and think, well, what are they trying to say about specifically black people who drink and gamble? And there are religious aspects to this as well, which makes it kind of question, are they trying to say that? I mean, I don't know what it's trying to say, but there are some very interesting criticisms. Different people responded to it. If you have a look on Wikipedia, they've sourced it quite well. You can read more about it. There's a lot of different criticism about why it's offensive. And there are various valid arguments for why it's considered quite offensive and unacceptable. I'm going to read you one line that I think sums it up really well. And this was an argument, I believe, from Weissenfeld. It is on Wikipedia, and you'll be able to see the full quotation in full if you go on there. But it says, to white viewers in the 1930s, the film's implication that blacks care for nothing but gambling, drinking, and dancing only reinforces notions of the dangers posed by urban blacks. So it is scaremongering, in a way, by basically saying, don't go near black people, all they do is dance and gamble. They don't actually care about being good and religious and getting into proper heaven. For them, heaven is drinking and gambling and doing things wrong. And I think that's it kind of goes back to what I said about it. Had it not just been black people, then maybe it wouldn't be so bad. It would be an observation on the kind of character who likes to drink and gamble. Whereas this is basically just showing black people doing that, and to impressionable white people who would easily buy into this kind of thing, it would be reasonable for them to think, well, not reasonable, but it would be understandable that they would come to the conclusion that that is how every black person behaves, and that they are, potentially dangerous and unruly and immoral. And that's damaging. So even though the action itself isn't horrific, people drink, people gamble, as long as you do it in a contained and sensible manner, it's not so bad. But this cartoon suggests otherwise, and I do think that it's definitely a very blatant negative message. I don't know if that's what they were trying to do. I imagine not. What I imagine has happened is that somebody, probably somebody who works for Leon Schlesinger at the time, or Warner Brothers, went down to, this is set in Harlem in New York City. I imagine they went down there, they went into this kind of environment, and yeah, most of the patrons would have been black at that time. And they've just tried to recapture that in animation form. But they haven't then thought about what that's going to suggest, unless they put it side by side with a similar scene that would have also been happening in a predominantly white community, because it would have done. Without putting them side by side, you're going to be sending out a very specific negative message. So I don't think they meant for it to be negative. I think they were just trying to bring to life through animation this particular experience that they witnessed, which is the case with some of their cartoons. But it didn't work well. It did not work well at all. I'd say watch it if you're interested in the history of Warner Brothers, in a lot of the attitudes at the time towards black individuals, because a lot of the attitudes at the time weren't deemed as racist, but in hindsight, of course they are. And I think Clean Pastures is a strong example of that. It's definitely worth watching as a lesson for how not to do this kind of cartoon. It's definitely interesting, and this is one of the censored 11. I don't believe all of them should have been censored, but this is definitely one where I do agree with that decision.